So we just finished setting up our database structure. Now we need a way to actually display this data and change the data in our database when a user submits information to the form. So let's get right into how to do that. Now, before we get into the workflow steps, let's add something to our UI in order to display the information that gets submitted. Because right now, if we click submit, well, nothing's gonna happen, and how cool is that? Not cool at all. So let's go ahead and add something here where we can display the information. I wanna come down and get a group. So we can go ahead and drag the group on our page. You can already see that it's highlighting the different sections of the page. This is telling me it's in align to parent, and I don't really want that. I actually want this in column format. So just press escape. Let's change our parent elements layout. Let's make it something like column. Great. So we have column, and I want to center align this. So how do we do that? Well, we have to go into this group, and we have to put it into center. So come down here to horizontal alignment, just move it over to the center, and you should be good to go. It looks the exact same. Now, if we drag our group on, like so, you can see it snaps to the bottom. That's exactly what we want. You can also center align this, and you can make it fixed width. Let's do just 500. Actually, let's make it just the same size. So 611. Great. Now, inside of this, though, nothing will be displayed just because we have a group. We need those text boxes. So let's drag a text box over, and we're gonna need 2 of these. We want to display our name and favorite food. So let's drag our text box on. And notice how it now is snapping the entire width of the element. Well, I'm actually recording this a bit in the future, hence the different background, and Bubble has updated. So now these elements are automatically taking up the entire width, which is really no big deal, somewhat annoying, but just make sure you come over to your layout and go to fit width to content. Go ahead and select that just so it's a little bit smaller and easier to work with. So let's go get our other text box and drag that over. Right now you can see it's going to be in column format. We're actually going to want to change this, but first let's change the layout again, make this a fit width to content, and then let's select that parent, which is the group that holds both these text boxes. Let's make it a row. So when we select row, notice they snap right next to each other. Then we can center align these. And then you just want to select each one. Make sure the text is center aligned as well. So if you come to parent or appearance, and then you scroll down, you can center both the text. So that looks a little bit better. Of course, we're not really worried about UI right now. I just want to showcase this functionality and how it's gonna work. Now, these, of course, are gonna be dynamic variables. Right now, they're static and will always show edit me, but we want them to show the values of whatever the user submits. That's our goal. So whatever they put for name, whatever they put for favorite food, that will get stored in the database. We want to take that data in the database and store it on our UI. So how do we do that? Well, in the group D, we can actually select what type of content we want to fetch or have access to. Now, whatever the parent element has access to, so do those children components. Now, for the type of content here, you could do either one and get the same end result. In this example, let's go ahead and choose user. So we'll select user, and then we want to select the type of data source, which of course is going to be current user's form. So this is giving us a red value now. Let's see what this issue is. Data source should be a user, but right now is a form. So it looks like we actually need to do form. Let's select form. You can see we now have access to the current user's form. And then once we have access to that form data type, based on the current user, we'll have access to their name and their favorite food. So let's do that. Let's change these and make these dynamic variables. We'll go ahead and get rid of edit me. And then we can select the current users. Actually, let's select parent group's form and then favorite food. So that will display that current user's favorite food. However, we also probably could have done it the other way. So instead of parent group's form, you probably could have done current user's form favorite food, and that will return you the same result. Now, why did I show you 2 different ways? Because I want you to understand that there's multiple ways of doing development. My way may not even be the best way. It's just the way I like doing it. So as you're going through this course, don't get too caught up in how I specifically do it. You may like doing it a completely separate way or find another way that's even better, and you should do that. So just don't get caught up in an instructor's way of doing things or someone else. Figure it out for yourself what the best way to do it is. Of course, I'm just showing you one possible way. So let's go back and actually do the parent groups form. So we'll select our dynamic data, parent groups form, and then its favorite food. We also want to select the name. So insert dynamic data again. We'll select the parent groups form, and then we'll select name. Now, we should have access to both of these pieces of content based off the current user. So let's go through that one more time. We have a parent element, our group form, and that form or that group has access to the form type of content. So the group now has access to everything associated with the form data type and everything with inside. And the data source, we're just selecting the current user's form. So we have the data type, then we select or give it some sort of parameter, which is only the current user's form, and we have access to all that data. That's why we can then do parent groups forms favorite food, because we know that's the current user's form, and then it'll be their favorite food and their name. Hopefully that makes sense. But before we preview, let's go actually set up the backend workflows. So right now, we just have create a new form. We have favorite food and name, but we want to actually add all fields. So we have favorite food, name, and user. Well, let's associate the current user. So user equals current user, and that's really all there is to creating a new form. Now, what would be the next logical step in this? Well, it'd probably be to correlate the form back to the user, which is how we set up the database. Of course, there's again going to be multiple ways to do this, but I'm just going to show you one that I like to do. So we can come here, and the thing we're going to do is make change to a thing. So we'll make changes to a thing. That thing's actually going to be the current user, so we could have just selected that step, but let's go the extra mile. The thing to change is going to be the current user. Now notice it went from make changes to a thing to make changes to a user. When you select the thing to change, it's going to change the title of the step. So keep that in mind if in another tutorial or somewhere else or here you see make changes to a thing and then all of a sudden it flips to make changes to a user or make changes to something else. Just know that they added something here to rename the title of the step. So we have current user, that's the thing we're changing. What do we want to change? Well, we only want to change the form. We want to actually add the form that just got created to that current user and store it there in a record. So how do we do that? Well, we can simply select the result of step one, which is that newly created form. Now, what gets stored in that form is simply going to be a string or ID that associates to that form data entry. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's kind of a lot, but once you go through it, you'll start to understand, it'll start to click. But just note, this is going to be a unique ID of the form. That's how we're accessing it through that current user. Great. So we have that. So the first thing that'll happen is they create a new form, then we add that form to the user, and now we should be able to submit an entry and, well, see data being put on our UI or our page. Now, it's important to note that when testing, you always want to run as a user. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, let's come to our data. Let's go to app data. You can see in all users, we don't have a user to use. We want to impersonate an actual user. When you just hit preview, you're not a user, you're an unauthorized user. You don't have any entry in the database, so we need to do that. Now, when creating these test users for development, all you want to do is come up to where it says new entry and click on that. Now in here, you can see the fields associated with the user. All you need to do is add an email. So we can just do test@gmail.com, click create, and then we're creating that new user entry. Of course, nothing displays here. Don't worry, all you need to do is do a quick refresh and you should be good to go. So you can now see that we have this test@gmail.com, and then we have this run as option. So we can run as the user, and now we're going to be running as test@gmail.com. So always do this when you're doing any sort of test or previewing on your database, your web page, etc. in Bubble. Just important to note that. Now you can also edit things. So if we come and click on this pencil, see now that we could change the email, we could change this unique ID, we could change this form, but you don't want to really change unique ID. First of all, don't ever do that. But we could change the form, for example, if we want to just do it manually. Anything you want to do manually in the database, and you probably will be doing this in development just for testing purposes, you just want to click on this pencil and you can add stuff manually. So if we came to form and we created a new entry, we could actually just manually add a favorite food, a name, and a user ourselves. We want to do this dynamically on our front end to make sure it works. So let's run as this user. We'll go to where our preview page is, and let's stay in debug mode. We'll go step by step just so we can see how this works. We'll enter a name, and we'll enter a favorite food, and let's click submit. So the step-by-step comes up. You can already see that it did successfully populate barbecue and my name, so that means it works, but let's just run through the steps anyways. We'll run next. You can see the initial values that are input. So we have barbecue, Tucker, current user, and then we have run next, and the result of step 1, which is going to be that unique ID, was then associated to the user, which is the form. So we associated the form with the user. What happened here is it just took this big object and stored the unique ID in that user table. That's how it was able to do that. So we run next, and then we're done. But if we didn't have that step-by-step, nothing would have happened. So if we just click submit, we would have seen it display, but there wouldn't have been any animation or success notification or anything like that. In fact, we don't even know what will happen if we do another entry. We hit submit, we run next. Okay, so it does change and updates the database. Let's try it one more time. So test 2, we have Italian. We run again. You can see it does update. Let's go to our database and see what happened. If we come into our editor and we refresh, you can now see that a new form was created. Okay, so we have a new form, we have it associated with our user, and that was the last form we submitted. If we come to forms, see we have multiple entries. So it was actually storing all of the entries in our database, but updating the user with the new form each time. So is that how we want to do this? Well, it depends on your specific use case. If you want the same user to be able to submit multiple entries and you keep track of all of them but only display the most recent, well, then we're good to go and we don't need to change anything. However, if you don't want multiple form entries associated with a user, then we have to change this. We have to add what are called conditionals. And to do that, well, we're going to pause here and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in the next video.